fortune for Mr. Calatrava. They got as far as digging a hole for the foundation of the spire. They got the steel in a perfect circle. That was as far as they got. The finances fell through, never able to resume construction. So from about 2000, wall reinforced with steel like a giant uncut swimming pool. They filled in the pit when they broke ground on that project, and honestly, I feel like Chicagoans that this building does not exist. It's the only exception to what I'm about to tell you, sort of the elephant in the room. So let's take a look at it. I'll explain how it got there later, but for right now, just pretend it's not there and look over to your right. And you're going to notice our entire lakefront is free and clear of any high-rise construction. That is everything east of Lakeshore Drive. That road reaches straight underneath. And we have one man to thank for this. Aaron Montgomery Ward. He is a hero in the city of Chicago. He single-handedly saved this lakefront for the future generations, fighting for nearly 20 years. So this was late 1800s. In other words, in Chicago, would oppose him at every chance. So he fights really hard. On either side of the water, these Art Deco towers. These are preserved from the original construction back in 1938. The roadway and the bridge has gone through a ton of renovation over the years, but they have managed to keep these towers intact. And this bridge is dedicated to the city of Chicago by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Traveled out here to give a big speech on the day of the dedication. On the way out, I most likely will on the way back. Sometimes people ask, so the color of the water here is this very pretty, muted emerald green. This is the natural color of the water. You might be familiar, we dye the river green on St. Patrick's Day. So people think it is residual dye. It's not. That runs out quickly. This is the natural color of the water. Okay, so now we're officially being ripped. When you go over to your left, just a bit up ahead, you'll see a newer building, complete back in 2021. With that blue tinted glass, 3 ascending towers, the tallest of which is just shy of 1,200 feet, becoming the 3rd tallest building in the city of Chicago. That is the St. Regis, designed by Jeannie Gain. She is head of Studio Gain, Chicago architect, Chicago native, doing incredible things. Jeannie Gain broke her own record with the St. Regis. This is now the tallest building anywhere in the world that was designed by a female architect. So we're very proud of that right here in Chicago. We're going to see a building that I think initially broke that record back in 2010 called Taco. That one's coming up in just a moment. Multicolored, always changing, so if you're still in this area later tonight, just look up and check that. Over here on your right side, shorter structure, windows protruding out towards the water. This is Nature Center, designed by Dirk William. In the 90s, this became home to the University of Chicago's Graduate School of Business, and you'll notice momentarily on the west end of the building, the absolute windows. On the other side of that bare wall are the classrooms, and this is where our business students are not distracted by any river shenanigans or goings on. It's still a little quiet, but in the summer it does get loud and rowdy out here. Chicago wants to be taken. So see on that west end, the windows are This is the very first office building constructed along the Magnificent Mile. A very popular stretch of Chicago on Michigan Avenue, which we are about to move under. And if you look up at that clock, you will see every number represented by the letter W for William Wrigley. Of course, Detroit building. And in long-standing tradition, this building lights up every evening in brilliant bright light. Yet another great view. This one once we emerge here. This is one of my favorite buildings in the city, which you are going to say quite a few times on the tour. Such a beautiful space. Andrew, so it's really great to see. Master, student. The designs situated right next to each other along the Chicago River, showing very disparate styles. Neander will work primarily with right angles, as you see here. Merchant Goldberg did not, as you will see in these towers. Goldberg said, there are no right angles found in nature, therefore he didn't include them in any of his designs. So these towers, very conceptual. They were designed to be a city within a city, complete back in 1964. This is an era. People are leaving downtown, moving to the suburbs. Goldberg wanted to provide incentive for people to stay downtown, so all of those suburban amenities that people are looking for would be included in a town and over here on your right side is a red brick, Ferry style building. This is called Reed Murdoch Center, 1914. Designed by a guy named George Siemens, it's gone through a lot of changes over the years. So this one started off as a grocery warehouse and for many years, Chicago's traffic court. Traffic court has since moved out, so now it's a place people are excited to visit. Presentation of this. That's shimmer and gold. And then over here on the right side, these bronze sculptures facing the monument with giant Pez dispensers. These are the merchant princes of Chicago, many will assume. They are our fellow politicians, but that is actually not how they work. Marshall Field, Philemon, Sears, Woolworth, they were all very important to Chicago's economy. So you can choose that right here in front of the market. 1929, commissioned by the Marshall Field Company. Initially was a wholesale furniture operation, and real quick, look over to your right. And from this vantage point, you'll just get a better idea of how massive the space really is and a better sense of the scale. Remember, it's over 4 million square feet. This building is so big, it has its own apartment. And then over here on the right side, you'll notice a couple of brand new residential towers. And as you can tell, these towers are drastically shaped apartments from Wolf Point. Wolf Point is where we're at right now. This is where the 3 branches of the River Clyde, the main branch, north and south. And the name Wolf Point goes all the way back to Chicago's frontier days. So try to imagine, it's 1833 of course, and none of these buildings are here yet, but on each bank of the river stood these multi-purpose venues serving as meeting halls. Churches, bars, hotels, anything they needed. This was the social hub of the city for years and years. And do keep in mind as we move along that Chicago is a relatively young city. And we are now making our way to the North Branch. And along the North Branch, you're going to get a very visual trip through time and progress. You can physically see progress along the North Branch more so than any other portion of the river. It is very apparent over here. So you'll see these modern developments colliding with these relics frozen in time, colliding with these old buildings were repurposed into modern spaces. See all that right away. Modern residential development on your right, all glass, by BKL Architects. And then just up ahead of that on the right, many years after the original construction, this particular area of the city has gone through tremendous change in relatively recent years. It moved from being an industrial warehouse district into what is now called River North. And at this point in time, River North is one of the priciest neighborhoods to live in all Chicago. It was in the 1970s that things began to shift. So a lot of the warehouses in this area are being vacated, and that is when the artists started to move in. Initially, they're moving in for all the space. There's no more classically inspired designs. Erie on the park has been called an instant. And just up ahead, on the right side, blue tinted glass, white vertical corner caps, 1974, Minoru Nagasaki. Initially, that was office space for Montgomery Ward. As I'm sure a lot of you know, Montgomery Ward has gone out of business, so since then, that has been transformed into condominiums and residential. On your right side, very lovely park. On the edge of it is a dog park. It's become this unwritten but very important rule that if you live at River North, you must own a dog. So this is where they all hang out. And in just a moment, very large building. This is the old. Hello, okay. Over here on your right side, this is the old Montgomery Ward warehouse. You all remember Montgomery Ward. He is the hero that saved our lakefront. He also invented modern mail order, which I assume every single one of us on this boat takes for granted at this point in time. So at this point, pretty much Goose Island. Goose Island is a man-made island, a planned manufacturing district. Big idea of our very first mayor, William Butler Ogden. Very field of dreams if you build it. Many years before the film, but that same mentality, that's exactly it. That fell through. And then there was a new proposal to build a giant casino and resort on this land. And that is what you see being constructed over to your right side. And that is projected to be complete within about a year and a half from now. So at this point in the tour, we're going to take a brief intermission. Feel free to replenish your drinks. As our captain mentioned, on the lower deck, we have complimentary coffee, tea, various hot drinks. Full bar, not complimentary, but everything else is help yourself. I'll be right back up. Respectively 5 and 6 stories tall. Every floor of every unit has its own private balcony. 1988 here at East Swiss Hotel, guys, so you'll see that signature triangular design incorporated. And because this is such rare space, 3 of the 4 units are to capitalize on what used to be an unobstructed river entry. So let's all take a look. So as you can see, things have changed very drastically in the last few years, but after this building went up for a while, I can say this. I could say, but at the very least, these few tenants on the south end of Riverbend, they still have this wonderful view coming up on your left side, but then hello, that building just happened. So at this point, anyone who lives or works over here, their views and lighting, at the very least, compromised, if not totally obstructed. There actually is a great view coming up on your left. I was taking photographs. I just want to take a look. Obviously, this view is now a bit delayed, but still very pretty. You can see that there. No disrespect to anyone involved, but just being very honest, these new buildings over to your left, they do make me sad because they're obstructing our view. You guys saw that giant deck to your left? You see the view of the park in its entirety. Now this whole end of the building is totally obstructed, and we're really missing service. We all see why that is. Very narrow and not the base very heavy at the top. It gives you the impression that it can topple over fairly easily in a strong wind, but you have to put your faith in the engineers, architects, and iron workers. They all know what they're doing. It is structurally sound. It's not going to tip over, even though that cantilever construction makes it look like a giant top-heavy popsicle. I've not seen anything quite like this, such a great, insane design. There is a central concrete wall that goes 125 feet down. It is such a popular symbol, it's all over the place. The Chicago flag is comprised of 4 red stars, which represent major events in Chicago's history. Battle of Fort Dearborn, the Great Chicago Fire in 1871, and the 2 World's Fairs of this year, 1893 Columbian Exposition, 1933. Century Park. In 1929, the river symbolized something very different than it does now. At this point, as you know, it can cost you millions of dollars to live on the river's edge of the downtown area. Not always the case. The river used to be very natural and dirty, so it's almost as if they designed this building for what the river become, as opposed to what it was back in 1929. Really, very architect. Unfortunately, we did lose in a few years ago this very tragic accident. It was a great loss to the architectural career. Chicago communities. So we'll see Blue Glass Waterfall here, and at least one more of Combiance Designs laboratory. Over here on your right side, beneath the buildings, trains running to and from Union Station, Metra, and Amtrak are gathered. And then this modern design at the top on your right by the standard. They were not the only ones. He has influenced architects from all over the world, hence international style. So when you're influencing that many architects, that many designers, stuff, because he wanted you to understand the construction behind the design. So generally, very dark and cold. On the window on the right side, short black glass, X-bracing on the outside. This is a squat reinterpretation of the John Hancock building. Remember we saw the one earlier, the north bench is really far away. It was a good view, fifth tallest. Always is much more contextual, curving up the river. Green tinted glass reflected. It has that rippling quality, iridescent. Here on the right side, another massive art deco. This is our old post office in 1932. This building had been vacant for over 20 years. The only use it had seen during that time was the filming of The Dark Knight, very popular Batman movie from a few years ago. They shot a lot of that here in Chicago. They used the space. There's a Gotham City Police sign on the rooftop, very big river attraction door. Daisy, out of protest, kicked over a lantern, starting the barn on fire, and for years, those two were blamed for starting the Great Chicago Fire, which took out this entire area of the city. Now, before I move forward, I would like to interject this very important point. Back in 1997, our former mayor, Mayor Daley, officially exonerated Councilman O'Leary and the crowd. They are no longer blamed for the fire in an official sense, both on off the hook. So at this point, we cannot be 100% certain of the exact pinpoint origin of the fire, but we do know that a culmination of many factors led to the overall devastation. We had very strong winds coming in from the southwest. The city had suffered a drought prior to the fire, and in 1871, Chicago was constructed mostly with wood, a lot of it chemically treated thus. So the fire erupted in the southwest end of the city. The wind was so strong that day, it pushed the fire right over the river, and the city went up in flames. The fire burned for 3 days, spanned 3 miles, and it left nearly 100,000 Chicagoans homeless, about a third of the city's population back in 1871. Over 18,000 buildings destroyed. So this is obviously urban before, and that is where you get one of our popular nicknames, the Second City. So you're seeing all around you is essentially the second Chicago. South Loop, this neighborhood, if you just take a look, you can tell it's grown a lot in recent years, last 15, 20 years or so, so much development. Most of it has been residential, and there is a lot more runway. Up ahead on the right side, third building with the curved windows. That is called River City. Does it look at all familiar to you or strike you? If you recall, the Corn Cob Towers we saw early on, same guy, Bertrand Goldberg, same idea, city within a city, though this was complete about 25 years after those towers in 1989. City within a city. Code with those various size balconies. And then to the right, a dot dot dash. This will be a lot shorter, off-white in color. You'll start to see grand bows, art columns at the very top. That would be the Insurance Exchange building. 1912, Burnham and Rue, probably the oldest building we'll talk about on the tour today, 1912. And remember, Beaux Arts or Neoclassicism, influenced by ancient Grecian or ancient Roman architecture. And again, that is how Daniel Burnham represented Chicago at the World's Fair of 1893 buildings. Very similar to that. People ask those buildings are still around from the fair. They are not. Temporary structures not built to last, but that is what they looked like. And then if you look to the right of the Insurance Exchange and look up, you'll see a statue perched on top of the Art Deco tower. She is Ceres, the Roman goddess of grain and agriculture, representing the fact that that is commodity exchange. That is the Chicago Board of Trade. Castle-like structure, 311, South Wacker, designed by Cohn, Patterson, and Fox of New York City, nicknamed the White Castle Building. And that castle-like structure at the top is there for style reasons only. Inside of it are 2,000 fluorescent tubes that light up every evening. Generally bright white, we will switch out the colors of the picture. But if you're driving into the city, you'll see that red rectangle on the arrow. That represents this building where it sits along the water. So it's kind of this big, you are here, and a fun, whimsical piece of art along the way. So check it out on your right side, right here on the Chicago, all the way up along the side of the school. And then once you're past this building, that view looking straight up at Sears. So try to imagine, again, building working twice as big. And also take note, on the 103rd floor of Sears, way up there, you can see those glass boxes protruding off the side of the building. That is called the ledge, which I've never ventured up to the ledge, but I've asked a lot of passengers about it over the years. The answers I hear the most when I just ask, how was it? So cool, awesome, loved it, thumbs up. Conversely, terrifying, never again. And I see a lot of captain. So Rachel Andre gave you proper information, but nobody calls it that forever. You can't always physically feel yourself swaying back and forth. Go into the bathrooms, look at the toilets, and you will see that water sloshing back and forth, creating that evidence that you are indeed swaying, which does sound frightening, but not as scary as a building. Used to be here, the Bauhaus building. I loved it. It had this really great feature. It had this rippled stainless steel moving horizontally across the side. One day, I came out to get a tour, and that building was gone. I doubted it. I had no idea what was happening. Devastating. So for about a year and a half after that, I was out here essentially crying about how much I missed it. And then one day you notice this. Look to the base of this building, and there is that rippled steel. So they knocked the Bauhaus building down, obviously kept the steel silver, eventually brought it back, stuck it on the side of this new building, gave it a new home. Honestly, I don't know if they heard me, but personally I was very excited, like I said. That was the best feature of that old building. I'm glad that a little piece of it will live on, especially in the midst of these radical, drastic changes in downtown Chicago. So I do like to pretend to take credit for that, sort of just give her something, so she'll quit talking about it every single day. I was relentless on the fun. And then over here on your right side, you'll see the red brick with the ivy. Another example of that Chicago school style. Remember, leading the way to the modern skyscraper. And I'll be heading back through Wolf Point and back up Main Ridge. There's a really cool building coming up. You only see the front of it, just to get a full picture of the space here. And then once we emerge, it's this grand curved glass structure. This is called Levine, or 333 West Locker. Such a cool building. 1983, designed by Kohn, Pedersen, and Fox of New York City. Very contextual. Chicagoans adore this building, and they were so taken by the design that Kohn, Pedersen, and Fox were asked to come. All those projectors cover this entire surface area. Now, if you look across the bridge over to your right, that first building across the bridge, sloped black glass into the road. That is called Builders Building. Now, if you focus on the flat roof, you can answer portion of those windows perfectly of the building up to the next this letter is replaced. You'll see that the building not sit or down. Arms sticking out looks like a giant chair or throne. This is where so looks back long term. So Chicago developed this fear that these buildings be so tall, there'd be so many, that they would obstruct the sunlight from coming down into the streets. So to prevent our streets from becoming these dark, airless canyons, the ordinance was passed. We saw lacquer coming up on the pediment at the very top. It might look familiar to you. I'll give you a hint. Nothing you've seen along the tour today, something very cool. So ponder that for a moment, just see if it reminds you of anything or strikes you. So 77 West Lacquer is a post-modern take on the Greek Parthenon in much taller proportions, sleek, postmodern design, one of my personal favorites along the Main Ridge. We started the tour, but I will stick with Henry for right now. And a little bit closer to us on the right, Jewelers Building, large dome, top and center, smaller domes in the corners. They lifted up to the respective floors while remaining in their vehicles. They went up to unload their precious cargo out on the street. For that very same reason, perfect spot for that speakeasy. Just focused over to your left side, and on your left coming up, Tribune Tower. With that medieval cathedral structure, it has just become residential, very unexpected, just underwriting major renovation for that. And something you could do while you're in town, this is very cool, there's a nice promenade over there, it's nice here to walk anyway. Walk around the perimeter of Tribune Tower and you will see embedded into the side of the building fragments from historical structures from all over the world. So pieces of over here on your left side, NBC Tower. Now you can see that logo up there beneath the spire, 1989 Adrian Smith. Post-modern take on the 1920s demo, modeled after 30 Rock in New York City. Judge Mathis films at film here for the first 18 seasons of his run before the new production opened to Stamford, Connecticut. I have a confession to make to all of you. So many years ago, I had the rare pleasure of working for Mr. Springer as a production assistant, so I met a lot of very interesting people inside NBC Tower during my time there. And that has prompted many passengers to ask or wonder what was it like working on the Jerry Springer Show. During his presidency, Barack Obama did stay here several times, even though his home is right down the road, just a few miles, pretty much immediately south of where we're at now. I think he stayed at his house once, maybe twice, where he was president, just a lot easier staying at the Sheraton, designed specifically to keep very important people safe and secure. Coming up on your left side, you'll see Centennial Fountain. And if you have any locals, you know how exciting this is. So, a while back, they shut the fountain off in the middle of the season, very unceremoniously. And there were a couple signs around that said to be shut down temporarily for maintenance, and then 5 years went by. Heard no word, saw no movement. I honestly thought it was going to disappear into history. Theodore's grandson, and he designed the fountain to commemorate a clean drinking water brought to us by the River of Vixen in 1900. And the fountain is running once every hour. Water will shoot from that clear obstruction in front and a large arc all the way across the river. It goes on the hour, every hour, about 5-10 minutes, very powerful. I'm so happy that I can say this again. You can check it out right after the tour at the edge of the boat dock, take a left. It'll be right there. And it will go on the hour. And to tell me, I think I pointed it out to you. You've seen almost 4 neighborhoods in the last 90 minutes or so. And now, coming up on your left, and despite Montgomery Ward's very best effort to oversee Lake Point Tower, they found some legal loopholes and they snuck themselves east of Lakeshore Drive as of 1969. Curved glass designer George Chagoy, John Henry. I call this one the Lone Ranger. Once we're east of Lakeshore Drive, feel free to look around. There are no other high rises. That side of the roadway is just them, and that is true going north or south. This is the only exception, the entire lakefront, the entire city of Chicago. And then once you move under the bridge, look to the base of there's a little bit of obstruction. But if you look really hard, you can see that the building is standing on stilts. And that would be one of those loopholes that I was referring to as the building is technically not on the ground. So that's how that works. And then at the very top, that circular structure, that was a restaurant called Cité Lounge. They shut down pretty recently. I don't think anything else has gone up there yet, but if you ate dinner up there, you ate great 360-degree views of the city, completely unobstructed. See up to the north side, all of downtown, the river, Slumboot, Museum Campus at Michigan, you look here, 360, you can see it all. Future reference of it southwest on Lakeshore Drive is Museum Campus. If you can see that dome way off to the right, once we clear that boat, that is the Adler Planetarium. The rest is pretty obstructed, but we also have the Field Museum, Shedd Aquarium, Soldier Field where the Bears play. To Chicago, if you haven't been yet, it is such an amazing place on Michigan Avenue. Few blocks west, few blocks south, about 25-minute walk from our boat dock. You could spend days at the Art Institute. There is so much to see, it never gets old, but I know a lot of your on vacation time is limited. So even if you have just a couple hours to spare, head over there. Amazing, wonderful, brilliant place. Walks over to the right. I don't remember if I talked about those at the beginning. Those are the locks. That's how you move between river and lake. And then over here on your right, Navy Pier. Very close walk from our boat dock. One more very important person to tell you about as you're coming to a close, making your way back to Ogden Slip. So over to your left, once you clear that new construction, you will be able to see Tribune Tower again. Remember we saw it a few minutes ago with that cathedral at the very top? So where Tribune Tower now stands is essentially where Chicago began. In the late 1700s, Jean-Baptiste Dusable made his home in that area of what would be Chicago. He is considered to be the first permanent resident of the city. Dusable was of Haitian descent, married to a Potawatomi woman named Catherine, and he had this great understanding of the potential of this particular area of the Midwest and this river connecting him with the heartland. So he became a fur trader, very successful. People took notice of that. They started to settle around Dusable's property, and where the tower now stands, that would become Frontier Chicago. So Dusable really got the ball rolling, brought people's attention to this area of the country. By about 1817, William Butler Ogden enters the scene. By 1833, we are incorporated. Ogden becomes our first mayor. He starts constructing Goose Island, kickstarting the industry, the economy, and we are establishing ourselves as a city. That goes on for some time, and then Daniel Burnham enters the Chicago scene. Burnham becomes our city planner, chief of the World's Fair of 1893. He was an architect in that short period of time, and now we have this wonderful, beautiful city to show for it. So that is where I am going to leave you today. On behalf of myself, our captains and crew, I'd like to say thank you for choosing Chicagoland. I do ask that everyone please just not crowd around that general area so the crew can safely dock the boat for all of us, get that ramp up. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your stay in Chicago, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.